just wanted to maybe start with a story or two about how you got into music. I read a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear more from you. I'm sure others would as well. I think it started very early, was my impression.
Yeah, before I could speak, my mum we'd go to the supermarket and she would hear me singing Beatles songs and stuff like that. I'm quite old. And she was really cool. She bought me a little portable kids record player, and she would buy me 7 inches of tracks that I heard in the supermarket. And because it was the early 70s, I heard Zeppelin and Hendrix and The Who and stuff like that. So my mum, and the Beatles, of course, and Paul McCartney and things like that. So my mum bought all this stuff for me. So I had a record collection when I was 2 or 3 already.
Wow. What was that?
It hasn't stopped.
When you say the portable player, was it one of those little suitcase ones?
Exactly.
I had one of those as well. I think we're both old, so that's all right. So you were listening to music before you were really verbal.
Yeah, and I wasn't really interested in cars and toys and things like that. I was just interested in records.
Do you think was it a feeling right from the beginning? I mean, can you remember? It's hard to remember that far back, really.
I'm not sure, but I was pretty obsessed from the get-go.
And then did you start with the guitar as a
No, I started with the drums, actually.
I read a little bit about that, too.
I only really switched to the guitar in my mid-20s.
So did you have to beg your parents for a drum kit and that whole thing?
Oh, yeah. They encouraged me to play the piano. They kind of made a deal with me that if I wanted to play the drums, I had to play the piano for a year, and they were hoping that I would forget about the drums. And exactly a year to the day, I said, all right, I did it. And but they were super cool, and they got me a used drum kit. My grandfather had a store in Sydney, in Australia, selling just used kind of junk. And I was really lucky to have access to all kinds of stuff. He really spoilt me, so I could go there and take records, and he had used records there, but he had effect pedals and reel-to-reel machines. So I already started sort of dabbling with electronics when I was 12, 13.
Wow, so you must have had sort of a mechanical inclination or a tinkering?
Tinkering, not mechanical.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so also the drum kit came from there. So I grew up in my teens sort of early on playing along to punk records and psychedelic 60s rock records, and at the same time making these really crude music concrete tapes of just collage stuff. I had a double tape recorder, and I worked out, how to flange by recording the same thing on 2 tapes and playing them together, and just sort of started to work things out. So I was always interested in electronics at the same time as being really interested in playing the drums. And then around the age of 13, I discovered John Coltrane via Hendrix, because I was interested in Hendrix's drummer, Mitch Mitchell, who was kind of emulating Elvin Jones. So that led to this big sort of free jazz obsession in my teens. Mm-hmm.
And when you started playing drums, were you also like playing with other people in bands and things like that?
Yeah, I kind of did all kinds of stuff, like playing weddings and restaurants and that kind of stuff. And then probably when I was about 17, 18, I started playing gigs, playing free jazz in Sydney.
And so had you taken any lessons at all, or did you teach yourself drums, or how did that?
I had a few lessons, but not many. But it was just from records. Everything I do is from records, pretty much, or going to gigs.
How's your record collection? Is it enormous?
My partner's over there. You should ask her.
Enormous, yeah. I bet.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid.
No, it's okay. I have one too, so I understand. Makes it hard to move, though.
It does. Yeah, literally. I'm probably home 3 months of the year, and it's a glorified storage space for my record collection, pretty much. Yeah.
So then, how did you make the transition to guitar? Was it something you were interested in and then sort of picked up, or take a lesson? How did you get into guitar?
I think like I mentioned, I was always interested in electronics, and it was kind of connected to that in a way. when I was at school, my dad would ground me for not doing good at school, and the way he would do that was taking my drum kit away from me and my record player. But I had this acoustic guitar that had 2 strings on it, and I could play that really quietly. So I sort of started to do that a little bit, and then I'd get really good grades and get everything back, and I'd forget about the guitar, and it was this weird cycle. But I already had effects pedals and stuff like that when I was younger, from my grandfather's store, and I used to travel to New York a lot in my late teens, early 20s, and one big thing was, I'd go to see as much music as possible until my money ran out, and then I'd go home and save up and sort of go back again. And I did that about 6 times, and one big sort of revelation was seeing Keiji Haino play solo in New York in 1991 or 1992. And that was a really big thing for me, because I'd seen loads of amazing players, but all of a sudden I was seeing someone that was doing something absolutely unique and personal, and it really kind of had nothing to do with technique or knowing how to play, even though he knows how to play. But it really struck me and made me rethink what I was doing as well. And so I came home and I had an electric guitar that we found in a rehearsal room that someone left there, and I started incorporating that with the drum kit. So I had it on a kind of like on a stool, and I was hitting it with a drumstick, and then I started using effects pedals and contact mics on the drums, and I kept gravitating towards guitar and electronics. And then I just sort of got to a point on the drums where I just thought, I can't really go any further with this, so I'm not interested anymore. And I was just leaning towards that, so I changed.
Did your drumming sort of affect the way you were experimenting with the guitar? I mean, in terms of rhythm and that sort of thing?
In those days, no. In those days, it was, I had no idea really. And I just turn everything up to 11 and go crazy. But funnily enough, now the drum stuff is really affecting the way I play guitar. A lot of my music records anyway that I've been putting out over the last few years have a lot of rhythmic elements and repetitive elements, and that's definitely influenced by drums and rhythm.
Yeah, I felt like there were some really wonderful rhythmic elements in the piece.
It was more abstracted, but I have some records that are much more overt. I just finished a new solo record, which is really probably the most rhythmical thing I've done thus far.
What was the name of the piece you played tonight, just because I wanted to ask? And
Live in San Francisco.
All right. We got our own piece. So was it completely an improvisation?
I mean, no, because I have a particular tuning. Oh, it's a little different tonight. I sort of have a few... some sort of a loose structure that I it's almost like a catalyst to go to try stuff and go on some sort of journey. And last week I did a concert with my partner Chris over there and in Tokyo, and it was very quiet, and I had a different tuning for that, and that kind of influenced the way I played in the beginning. I thought I would sort of try that a little and see where that goes. So,
well, since we're talking about all the gear, of course I know I'm not the only one who wants to ask about that beautiful cabinet over there, the Leslie. Can you tell us a little bit about what a Leslie is, first of all, for those of us who don't fully understand them, and like how you got into using them?
Mm-hmm. It's a cabinet, I think, from the 40s. I'm probably wrong, but primarily it was used with Hammond organs, and there's a kind of a motor, a fan in the back of it, and it's got 2 speeds, so it sort of literally spins the sound around like a Doppler effect. It's kind of like a Doppler effect, vibrato effect, and I just love the sound of it. And so many records that I love from the 60s have Leslie's on guitar, actually. Loads of records that we all know, probably don't realize it, but it's there.
Can you give me a couple examples? I mean, I think
Loads
I know
of,
a couple.
I mean, loads of late period Beatles records, you know.
Right, like Revolver and
Revolver,
or even later than that. Yeah.
Actually, Revolver, John Lennon's vocal on Tomorrow Never Knows was going through a Leslie. That's how they got that effect. I think that was the first time the Beatles used a Leslie in that way. But, you know, later, like a lot of Abbey Road has guitars through Leslies. Most 70s rock does. But I was recording with Sun, this American group, and we were doing the Monoliths and Dimensions record in Seattle, and at this beautiful studio, and there was a Leslie cab there, and when we were on a break, I just plugged into it and started doing my solo kind of stuff, and yeah, I can't believe how good this sounds. And Stephen O'Malley said to me, why don't you just put it on your rider and see what happens, you know, when you do a gig next? And I did, and I got one. So
I don't even know how we got one.
Thank you for getting me one. So
Wayne, you'll have to tell me that story later.
They're not that.
They're
people
not hard
always
to
go,
come by.
ooh, yeah, but they're actually, you know, if there's a Hammond organ, then there's usually a Leslie. So I used to be in bands in the 80s where there was an organ player and they would have to schlep one of those and a huge Hammond organ. It was completely normal to do that in those days. Now it's like less common to see it. And they make pedals that supposedly emulate, but it just doesn't have the same effect because it's really spatial. It's a physical object. It's not this electronic effect emulating sound spinning in the space.
Right, which we can do in here. Sometime you'll have to come back and spin some sound around.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
The other question I wanted to ask you about was all the effects pedals and how many chains of, you know, signals are you working with?
I think tonight there was about 6 or 7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And is that something that you mix up each time and try different things?
Yeah,
or?
It's kind of usually the same setup lately, but there's so many options to do kind of spatial things. Like sometimes I'll have a dry signal coming out of the Ampeg and then it'll sort of go across to the Leslie wet signal in a way, and then it gets spun around and I can kind of play around with that a bit.
That's cool. I also really love the sort of long, deep bass tones. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I've got a laptop backstage and it's just playing it. I'm actually just, I detune my guitar. It's quite low. So it's already quite low, and then I'm pitch shifting the guitar and I'm playing a lot of pure tones or harmonics and kind of sampling them on the fly really badly. So they almost sound like sine waves in a way.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
But there's something kind of wrong with them, which is what I like. They're not totally pure. There's like these sort of defects.
Is that what causes the textural sort of... It feels like like tonight anyway, it felt very textural to me. And some of the other pieces of yours I listened to.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the clicks that I really love is actually me making mistakes on purpose, like kind of finding in the effect pedals, finding things that they're not supposed to do and sort of utilizing that. So the clicks, for example, are me sampling myself badly, which is what I do all the time because I like that effect. And at one point, the pedal that I do it with broke, and I sent it. It was the first model of this pedal. I think since then there's been 8. But when they made the second one, they fixed it so those things wouldn't happen anymore. So I wasn't interested.
Did you write them a letter?
Well, once it broke, and I sent it to them to repair, and they were like, "Oh, this is the old one. We can, fix it for you." And I said, no, don't do that. And they were really baffled about that. And I explained, and I sent them what I did, and I was like, this is why, and they just didn't write back. They're like, oh, this guy's obviously a weirdo.
also found when I was listening to some of your work and sort of reading about you that you do a lot of collaborative work and play with a lot of other people, and I was sort of wondering about the difference between doing that and doing your own thing and like moving between those.
Oh, I love doing collaborations because it's a challenge, and you're working with someone else, and it feeds into what I do in the solo context. I'm always getting ideas from doing collaborations, because sometimes, you're sort of out of your comfort zone because you're working with someone else with a different palette. And I did a gig in Tokyo last week with Jim O'Rourke and a Japanese drummer and a Aussie drummer, Joe Talia, who I work with, and I found myself doing stuff. I was like, why are you doing this, But it just seemed to work at the
in
time.
That place, yeah.
So it kind of feeds into what I do solo. It keeps things fresh in a way. I like the idea of just being pushed by other people.
And then that affects your solo work and sort of might help you shape or inspire other pieces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually a lot of my solo records the last few years have a lot of collaborators on them, and I'm really interested in kind of bouncing ideas of other people and telling them what I want them to do.
Let's see. I was going to ask a little bit about the actual compositional process that you go through, because I don't know about everybody else. I felt like I traveled through several aural landscapes during the performance. For a while, I thought I was shooting through space, and then at some point I was in a dark forest. These are what's happening in my head. But I wondered what your compositional process is like for you.
I guess I'm interested in sounds that please me in a way, and just working with things that I might want to hear or things that I don't really understand. Like I like it when something's happening and I don't really know why or how it's happening. It's almost like it's sort of playing itself after a while, and I try and get into a state actually where it's almost like not me anymore, it's just something else. And I'm really interested in long sounds and things that take their time to unfold and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of the music I love
is like that. So is it, I guess what I was wondering too is does it have a meditative quality or a trance sort of inducing quality? And I don't mean to put that on the music. What I mean is for you, the experience of like either writing it or playing it.
I mean, for me, when it's working, I get into that state. Yeah, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes sometimes I'm struggling the whole time to get to that point, and it might take a long time to get to that point. Everybody's got to suffer with me until I get there. But if I don't get to that point, I don't really feel satisfied. It's almost like drugs or something. I'm addicted to getting to that point in a way.
And so is that when you get to that point, is it a particular feeling? You just know you're there kind of thing?
It's kind of a feeling where, I'm listening to it too. It's like I'm in the audience almost. And
wow.
A lot of my records as well, they only come together when something kind of, I feel that it's working when something magical, which I can't even pinpoint why it's happening, happens, and that's why I make so many records too, because I just love that feeling where all these things come together that shouldn't really work, and somehow it becomes something else.
So you said that you travel most of the year, and is that has that been true for most of your life, traveling a lot like that?
I mean, I was already kind of traveling in my late teens. Like as soon as I could leave Australia, I was gone.
Is that because it's so far away from everything else, kind of, or?
Yeah, I mean, Australians tend to, when they leave, they really leave for quite a long time. You don't just go away for 2 weeks, you'll go for a year.
Right, I have met some, yes, along the way.
But, for me, it was getting out of this small little scene or ghetto that I was in, and so many musicians and artists that I loved, I just wanted to go and experience it in person. And since then, I've just been really addicted to traveling and being in different places all the time. So, and I'm really fortunate to be able to do what I do and be invited to do it in different parts of the world.
So I just have to ask, do you like that feeling of disorientation that comes when you arrive somewhere in the middle of the night or,
Sure.
whatever?
Depends where I arrive. But I do. I mean, I get really antsy if I'm in the same place for a while. And it's a weird existence trying to adjust, especially when I'm home. I really struggle with being home for a while. This thing happens to me where I actually wake up in the middle of the night only when I'm home and I don't know where I am and I'm looking around.
Yeah.
Where am I, And that doesn't really happen to me when I'm traveling. It's probably a bit screwed up.
Okay, well, I think maybe we should open it up for a few questions. You okay with that?
Sure.
All right. I think we have a mic in the house here. We'll get around to you.
Hello? Which was the pedal that you prefer the first version of?
The boomerang, which is from
the loop pedal?
It's kind of like a delay loop pedal. By the way, I hate loops. But it's from Texas, yeah. And there's loads of them that they've made since then that are really small and compact, which I actually would prefer because of just carrying this stuff around the world. But that particular one has a quality that I really like. Maybe because the bit rate is quite low.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question? We have one up here, Fran.
Thank you for that performance. So I wrote this question down. I've been pretty interested in using tape looping and synthesis as an effort to sonically access and explore different parts of my and my family's Jewish identity. I was wondering if you could speak to how your Jewish identity and upbringing influences your work.
Well, I question everything I do. And I hate myself. Well, it kind of influenced me. I mean, when I was younger, my family weren't religious at all. They're actually quite the opposite. But when I was young and listening to a lot of free jazz, I was really, probably when I was about 15, I started reading a lot of texts, and because of John Coltrane and a lot of impulse jazz, because it was kind of, Pharoah Sanders and that kind of stuff was sort of spiritual. And that really interested me, and then I started to read a lot of Jewish texts, mostly mystical, Kabbalistic stuff, which Coltrane was kind of reading as well. It kind of influenced him. So I couldn't believe that John Coltrane was reading stuff like that. I was like, oh. So that's kind of what got me interested. And then it was partly rebelling against my family, partly, just being in my teens. I fully started studying that stuff as soon as I finished high school. And there was an allure because a lot of the places to study that stuff was in New York. So it was like, perfect. I could do that during the day, and then at night I could go see Cecil Taylor, which is kind of what I was doing for 4 or 5 years. And it really fed into my music in a way because it was very disciplined. Like we would study from 7:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night, 6 days a week. So there was this discipline and structure that you had to have. Yeah. And a lot of my early releases, like there's a release on Sadik, and that kind of, there's a melody that I learnt when I was in this rabbinical college that really inspired me because it had a lot of meaning behind it, and I liked the melody too. So I made this record with a friend of mine on Sadik where we sort of investigated that piece. And so early on, I was it kind of influenced what I was doing. But there is, I mean, I don't know, a lot of the stuff I love has some sort of quality where you can lose yourself in the sound. You know, it's something that's very physical, but there's something other, you know. And I don't know if that's connected to my roots or anything, but I'm really interested in that, in what I make and what I like to listen to too. Yeah.
Oren,
Over here.
I'm curious, how long can you go on like this? I mean, what's the longest performance you've done?
Well, I'm going to have one hell of a blister tomorrow. It's already starting. It is quite physical, so I'm actually doing stuff, so I do get a bit burnt out. But sometimes, you know, if it's working, I kind of don't want it to stop almost. So I have done shows that have been 4 hours long, but that's more because that was the deal, like, you know.
They said you have to play
yeah,
for
you got to
4
play for 4 hours. I've done... No, those were collaborative. Yeah, I did a duo with a Swedish musician called Johan Bertling in London last year, and it was, I think, minimum 4-hour performance, and actually went so quickly. We also had, I had guitar and drums, and he had bass and a Hammond organ. So we had stuff, we could move from thing to, you know, instrument to instrument, but it flowed. We didn't stop for 4 hours. And I don't know if I've ever done anything solo for that long. I could do it right now if you want. No.
Oh, we have another question up here.
Hi. I'm quite familiar with that moment where you're creating sound and you lose yourself in it, or you become a listener, or you find that satisfaction, that space. And I was curious, tonight, at what moment, if you did, when did that happen for you?
Tonight it was kind of fleeting.
In and out?
Yeah. Probably in the more loud bit, to an extent, that happened.
Same here.
Cool. Yeah. But I think I was kind of going for something else tonight. So I wasn't really that wasn't the modus operandi in a way, but it kind of happened for a little while for me.
I'm always curious because when I lose myself in music, or particularly something instrumental and tonal, if the player's having the same experience.
Totally self-indulgent.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions out there?
Thanks. For your recordings, how much of it comes almost in one take or kind of improvisational versus something that you're laboring over for days or weeks?
Funnily enough, the labor stuff is what's going through my head before I do the recording, and dealing with the recording after it's done. So the mixing and the editing. This always happens to me. The actual recording is me going, I'll just try this and see, you know, and then that always stays. I don't know why. And then I'm kind of regretting it. It's like, I could have done it better, and it's really rough. But maybe there's a feeling there that because I'm not taking it super seriously, there's a freshness to it that I just get stuck with in a way. So a lot of times, the actual execution will be really quick, almost without thought. And then after, I'm combining elements and asking other people to add to it and mixing it and editing it. And that can take a while.
Do we have maybe one more out there? Oh, back there in the back. Oh, sorry, Fran. Maybe two more. You'll be the last. There we go.
Hi. Have you ever explored or collaborated with somebody using the voice? And I don't mean like singing, but like the human voice's sound. Is that something?
Sure. Many times. Yeah, I really like that. I actually really like the combination of what I do, or let's call it electronic textures with acoustic textures. That really interests me. much more than working with another electronic musician. I like something really fragile coexisting with like a lot of the subs that I use, for example, and something really delicate with something really kind of powerful. Like the two things, trying to juggle those two things or those two worlds really interests me. And it's difficult to do live, but on my records, I try to do that. So sometimes it's the voice or you know, someone hitting a bell really quietly, you know. I'm interested in acoustic textures. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Why is it so difficult live with using the voice, for example?
Because a lot of what with a voice or with a lot of the acoustic things that I like them to be played really quietly and delicately. And a lot of what I do, for it to have the effect that it has, they're physical sound waves, physical tone, so it has to be kind of felt in a way. So even mixing that stuff can be quite difficult. I've had mastering engineers say I quit in the middle of a session because I'm trying to have something powerful and delicate at the exact same time. I don't want it to be new age music. I don't want it to be this sort of balls to the wall drone record. I hate the word drone. I shouldn't have used that word. But I want this thing to sort of kind of coexist, so it's just something else, you know?
Okay, let's take one more from the back there.
Hi. So I was interested. You're saying that for a lot of the music that resonates with you, it's slow. It takes some time to develop. It has a payoff at the end. I'm wondering what are some examples of music that you listen to that don't have that are fast-paced, quick, like don't have as much of an abstract quality. Like what are some examples of that kind of stuff that?
A great pop song. I love pop music too. I love songs. I'm not, you know, sometimes like I really don't want to hear experimental music, whatever that means, you know. I mean, to me, a lot of great song-based music, especially from the 70s, is just as experimental or more experimental than a lot of the, you know, so-called experimental music. So I really like this sort of condensed 3 to 4 minute thing that is kind of single-minded in a way. The way a lot of minimalist music I like is really single-minded, but there's so much detail and variation and genius in a way in a really concise song. That really inspires me too and really influences what I do.
I might have to make you a 70s AM Gold CD from my own collection someday and send it to you.
Come over to my place.
Okay, well, it's been such a pleasure. There's a couple things I just wanted to let you know. Oren, you have a few records here, right? Just a few.
Maybe 4.
Yeah, not many.
Not
So
many.
if anyone's interested, come see Oren after the show for some vinyl. I also just wanted to say a few thank yous before we finish. Wayne Grimm again, our curator for Resonance back there. And our wonderful staff, both public programs, Fran, D'Alessio back there, and all of our Moving Images staff here. We really appreciate you coming to Resonance. We have one more show this season, which is in June. Ashley Paul will be coming over from the UK, I think. And what's next for you, Oren? Maybe that's what we'll close on.
I go to Milan on Sunday.
You really do move quick.
Yeah, so I'm going to be there for 2 to 3 months and kind of using it as a base, but doing lots of gigs around Europe.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. Well, thank you so much for coming and
Thanks
joining
for having
us.
me.
Thanks, everybody.